but it's not the whole story, because to go to wellness retreats or to practice mindfulness or to eat organic or to have a net zero home is wholly insufficient in addressing the collective suffering of this moment. It is wholly insufficient. Mindfulness is not going to end racism at all, right? Abundance mindset is not going to solve poverty, systemic poverty. Eating organic is not going to feed hungry people around the world. Like, it's just like the absurdity of it, actually.
Wow.
And that's not to say those things are wrong or bad, but I just think that like we need to go deeper.
Peace, peace, peace. Welcome. What's up, everybody? I am so excited to bring to the Everlutionary Podcast today an old friend, a partner in the movement and activism and healing the planet, Kerri Kelly. Kerri, welcome to the Everlutionary Podcast. How you doing?
So amazing to be here with you, my friend.
I am so glad you said yes. Thank you for saying yes. Thanks for all the work you do in the world. You're inspiring and constantly just shaking things up. Tell us a little bit really quick about like what's been going on, like revolution in your life, something new, something that's shaken for you, something you've been sitting with.
Oof. I mean, I feel like my whole life has been shaking me to my knees. From like 9/11 to divorce to, moving across the country to changing careers to like waking up to whiteness, right? And that wake up call, which continues to deliver, I think, lately, I think it's been, I think the thing that's been rocking my world is just really reckoning with this moment that we're in, this moment of collapse, and having to sort of recalibrate my understanding of like where we go from here, and challenge everything that I thought I knew about change making and transformation in a time of collapse, in a time of deconstruction, right? Where like the things that I thought were transformable and changeable, we might not be able to fix, in fact. And so that's been like a tidal that's been like a tidal shift in not just in my life and like how I be in the world and how I survive and how I show up in my community, but most definitely in my organizing and my activism. Because I think that some of the old levers that we used to rely on for change making, for disruption, for resistance, for power building aren't working anymore.
Right.
And so where do we have power? How do we organize? What is the best response that meets this moment? What do we not know about what's needed and what's possible, right? How do we experiment with things that we've never done before, and be open to change and be open to failure and be open to getting it wrong and get up and try again? And so that I feel like has been like a real sort of like chiropractic adjustment for me in my organizing and activism work, because we're in a different moment right now than we were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I just think it's really important for us to be like, what is this moment and how do we meet it with as much skill and creativity and curiosity and grace as possible? And so that's just been alive for me in every aspect of my life.
I'm feeling so much of that word collapse. It feels like, I mean, a part of building again, of course, is to allow things to fall apart. And so as things are falling apart, what you're saying about, well, how do we take things that are really strategies we've used in the past as organizers, as movement builders, as people that are working in schools and working in communities, those strategies don't necessarily work anymore. And how do we go from what we used to know to what we need to now know to be effective and still trying to make some real things happen? And how do we do that in a way that's honoring our own personal journey of being where we are in America, in the United States of America, which is the center of current modern day imperialism. You wrote this incredible book called American Detox. And, for listeners that don't yet know, Kerri and I have been weaving and dancing around each other for years, I've seen Kerri at protests in Washington, D.C., leading
right.
protests like remember the Women's March in DC? I think that was in 2016.
Oh my
I saw you at
God.
like panels in DC. Like Kerri and I were interesting because we both have been in the world of yoga and meditation and wellness, but I think both of us have actively done all we can to not be labeled as necessarily yoga teachers and wellness guides. And I think our activism speaks for itself. And Kerri, that's where you and I think I've always felt really a deep kinship with you and your spirit and how you show up and how you really bring intersectionally the issues together. You made this book all about it called American Detox. And for listeners that have never read the book yet, I mean, first of all, what inspired you to write the book? And tell us a little bit about what the book is about.
Thank you for this question. I mean, it was inspired by like a lifetime of living in this body and learning a kind of thing and then realizing I got it all wrong and I had been living a lie. And so I just want to like own that part of it is in this book, I weave a lot of my own sort of unraveling and waking up into the book, especially as I start to introduce social and political concepts that I really only learned later in life. And like you, like I have always been a seeker of healing, especially after 9/11. For folks who don't know, I lost my stepdad on 9/11. He was a fireman. That was like the very first revolution, to use your word, in my life.
Yeah.
And it was like the ultimate disruption because it made me question everything I knew about everything.
Yeah. Well, didn't your stepdad run up the building? And
Yeah.
your stepdad was in New York City as a fireman, and he ran up the building to save people, and the building collapsed. From what I remember the story, right?
He was based. He was a lieutenant at Ladder 15, which was in South Street Seaport. So he was a few blocks away from the towers at the time. And my understanding of his story is that he responded to the first plane hitting the first building and literally saw the second plane hit, redirected the truck to the second building before I think there was even like a dispatch of like, everybody report to, like, he just was like, whoa, go there. And he led his men in. They ran up 78 flights of stairs. He made it all the way up to the floor of impact before the building came down. And I know this because we had this incredible miracle happen after 9/11 when so many people were navigating with very little information, like, where are my loved ones? What happened? Are they okay? Will I ever retrieve their body or their remains? We were able to recover his radio feed weeks after 9/11. And so we have like his whole interaction with his team in Tower 2 leading up to the moment of collapse, which I know sounds kind of intense, but was like the greatest. I've got like chills. It was like the greatest gift to like have a window into those final moments and to hear his voice and to like and his courage and his fear and his leadership and he just didn't even question what he had to do. He just like went all the way in and all the way up while everyone else was running down and out. And and his his example of how we respond, how we like show up for the front lines of this moment and our future has been so has been such a like informing principle in my life ever since. And so like that was a huge wake up call. And that sort of put me on this path of like really seeking healing. Like, how do we recover from this? How did this happen? Like, where do we go from here? And that's when I found yoga, right? And I totally fell for yoga and wellness and healing, hook, line, and sinker, and like bought into all the bullshit of it. Like, I love the way you described us. Like, I've always been like awake to that. No, for the first portion of my, wellness career, I was like, wellness is the way. I really believed that because it saved my life and it gave me a way to metabolize and process and grieve and feel and also like critique and question, right? What I had been taught about what is normal and what is safe and what is real. And so like yoga for me as a lens and a practice was really formative in my transformation, right? And in my politicization. Like it also is the thing I think that lifted the veil so much so that I could see clearly what was not right. But of course, like as I sort of moved through my own wellness journey as a person in the movement, in the industry, as an influencer, as a leader, I started to ask hard questions about wellness, because I started to realize that while there was this like massive industry around wellness, at the time when I wrote this book, wellness was a $4.3 trillion global industry. Now it's almost $7 trillion, right?
Wow.
And so while wellness was soaring and everyone was gaga for wellness, inequality has never been higher. And
Wow.
I couldn't square that in my brain. I was like, wait a minute. Something's not right here if all of us are trying to like life hack our way into longevity and transcendence, and people are suffering more and more and more every day. And that sort of well-being gap is really the thing that inspired this book. I wanted to write about my own kind of humble, humiliating experience of like buying into the myth and waking up to like how I was implicated in that, but also into like the political theory, the political history that is a part of the wellness industry, is a part of how we got here, so that we could actually get to a conversation where we're talking about how do we really heal together? Like, what is it really going to take for us to heal? And my theory in this book, obviously, is that like we don't need more juice fasts and yoga fads. We actually need to detox from white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, right? Like that, those are the things that are making us sick, not, Coca-Cola. Although, to be clear, like also.
Yeah, Coca-Cola is also making us sick. And it's a part of a big corporate machine that is trying to sell us anything they can sell us to make us addicted to something. Because when we get addicted to something, we can't stop buying it. And if we can't stop buying it, then those corporations will keep making more and more money off of us. So it does become this cyclical spiral.
That's right.
But I love, so American Detox, and we have global listeners, and this is great because I often think about how America, the United States of America, let's be clear, there's South America, there's North America. America is not all of the Americas.
The U.S.
The
is
United
not the
States
America.
of America. Yeah, we're not the America. Right. We are a America, part of America. Yeah. The United States of America, we've been exporting culture
that's right.
to the whole planet. And that capitalism culture that we've been exporting has
and wellness.
And the wellness culture has
and Western wellness
deeply impacted, deeply scarred, just deep indigenous lineages, traditions, people, ancient ways of being. And through that process, we think about detox. When I think detox, of course, that's exactly what I think. I'm thinking, oh, let's have a detox. You tuned into the Everlutionary Podcast today. You're thinking you're going to learn about juice fasting. You're thinking about, you're going to learn about raw diet. Let me detox from, we're talking about, it sounds like almost an emotional, spiritual detoxification that has to happen with even values too. I'm thinking like there's values that we need to detoxify from, because these values have deeply impacted our ability to show up in the world as humans with compassion and care and love in our hearts for our neighbors. So tell us more about that detoxification, what in the book, and how do you frame this in the book, and how do you bring people in to a conversation that's not really that normal, right? Because when we think of wellness, that's exactly right. I'm thinking about, I have to go to my yoga class. I gotta buy my shakes. I gotta get my sauna. And in addition to that, there's a whole lot of other work that has to happen. So talk more about that.
That's right. Well, the first thing I'll just say about the name of the book, American Detox, because I'm really glad you brought it up, is we had this like big debate, my editor, myself, and the publisher, right, about the fact that like the U.S. is not the whole of America, but we actually did it very provocatively because we wanted to like shine a light on American exceptionalism, how we think, in fact, that our exports, right, that our progress, that our suffering is the worst, is the most important, is the best, is superior, right, so like we did that very provocatively, in fact, because we wanted to sort of uplift that like contradiction, which was really interesting. And, so much of what unfolded for me as I was writing the book, like at first I want to say I was writing about this gap, right? This sort of like well-being gap between who gets to be well and who doesn't, and how it's steeped, right? And entrenched in inequality, right? And then I started to really get curious about the myths that we have been sold and that we've been buying, like literally buying, but also like buying the narratives of these myths, and also internalizing in ways that are for a lot of us are unconscious, right? Like the myth of separation, right? That goes way back, that says that we are superior to the land and to nature, and that therefore nature is a resource and we can extract all that we need. And like the lineage of that myth alone, right? Which I would say is maybe the myth of the root of the root of the root of the root of the root, right? The myth of all myths, right? Is the myth of separation. And that spawned the myth of supremacy and superiority, right? That humans are superior above nature, above God, above animals, above other humans,
animals.
above other humans, right? Above other beings, above other genders, above everything, right? And then of course the myth of scarcity, right? That has been designed by capitalism and driven really through our culture to make us believe that there's not enough ever. There's not enough to go around. There's not enough to feed everyone, which we know. And I'm not saying that resources are infinite. They are not. But we do know that like billionaires could feed the planet in this moment today.
Oh, absolutely.
There is enough to go around. And so like the idea that we have to hoard and compete and take money and keep people in poverty so that billionaires have like a lion's share of wealth and resources at the expense of everyone else is, just like and these myths are not neutral. They're not passive. These are violent myths that have cost lives, that have cost endless suffering, and they're alive in us right now. They're alive in me. I'm to be clear, like I really believe that like these sort of like internalized narratives are like, it's like culture. It's like the air that we breathe, right? We're breathing in culture, right? We've been trained and socialized in these myths. And so I don't think it's as simple as being like, I don't buy into scarcity, or I'm not a supremacist, or I don't believe I'm separate. I don't think it's enough to like cognitively believe, because what we know about the body, right, is that the body is going to do a thing, even if the mind believes. We bring everything online, right? Even in just the questioning of like, is this in fact true?
Yeah. I love that you, first of all, you called in billionaires. And for those that are paying attention and tuning in to the Everlutionary Podcast, the last episode we just had was all about billionaires. And it was called Billionaires Are the New Kings, and Why Billionaires Should Not Exist. So tap back to the last show and episode so you can get more deeper information and understanding on how economically unjust this pyramid is that we are entrapped in. And then the second thing that you said that's really like got me moving right now is this idea of scarcity, right? Because I feel like so much of the wellness community, and there's this myth, almost a spiritual myth that I hear a lot, like, oh, it's like high vibration to think of everything as abundant, and everything's abundant, and like, let's be abundant mindset. And I'm like, this abundance mindset is actually the reason why we often are falling into the pitfalls of capitalism. And to me, there's really something deep in remembering that scarcity is also sacred. There is something deeply sacred around the scarce, and everything doesn't have to be abundant. In fact, it's quite a beautiful thing to know and recognize that there are finite resources on this planet.
That's right.
It's not infinite. It's actually, it seems abundant in this moment, but it's not all abundant. It's actually, there is some scarcity, and that is also precious. It's what brings preciousness and gratitude to our waking moments, when we know like this will not last forever if we don't take care of it. So to me, I want to challenge that myth a lot. This abundant, oh, let's all be abundant. That's, the high flying spiritual gumbo that I hear.
Yeah. And I think that you're making me think about too, how like words are political and right. Cause like words like scarcity and abundance, like in its, I think, original intent don't mean what we mean when we say those words.
Hmm.
And I think what we mean when we're talking about like spiritual abundance is accumulation, ownership, enclosure, right? Hoarding. Like
Mm.
that's actually like security, like it's mine, not like it's a resource that we share and that's
Right.
reciprocal, right? It's like a very unnatural uh orientation around abundance, and the same for scarcity, right? Like the myth of scarcity isn't that like scarcity isn't real as a thing. It's that like we've been socialized to believe that there is not enough. There is never enough, that we always have to strive for more, that we have to
Mm.
make more and more money every year, that we have to accumulate more things, that we have to have bigger houses and bigger cars. And that's just bullshit, right? But we do that and it's like never enough. A 3,000
Right.
square foot home is like never enough. And so I just think like the invitation in this book, right? And I think in this work is just to like examine, like, is that really true?
Yeah.
Is that really
Yeah.
true? And where did I learn that? And is that my belief, or did I inherit that from some system, some education, or some like lineage that actually I didn't consent to. I didn't consent to learn that.
Hmm.
Even if it's moving its way through my body. And so I just think it's an invitation to like re-examine. And then, of course, bring the body along in how we move differently, right? Like I was saying, like, it's not enough for us to change our minds, right? Because we know that so much intelligence is stored in the body. So even if we think we know, the body is going to do a thing, especially if it feels threatened, right? That we have learned this through the biology of trauma. And so how do we attend to how we move in the world, how we react and respond, right? What's
Yeah.
stored in our bodies, our patterns, our dynamics. And so that piece has also really been hitting hard for me after writing American Detox in particular, because, I joke that I wrote 98,000 words about, decolonizing and dismantling the system. And I would
Yeah.
still do the thing. I would still
Yeah.
act entitled under the right conditions, right? I would still
Ooh.
buy into the bullshit. And so like, I
Whoa,
really
whoa,
had
whoa,
to
whoa,
look
whoa.
at that.
What does that? What does that mean? I want to back you up right there, though. The gloves are off. I love it. What what does that mean to act entitled? To say that, what does that mean to you to say that you would act that
For
way?
me, for me, like in this particular body that I've been born into and that has been socialized, which is like white, cis, het, grew up outside of New York City, able-bodied most of the time, right? With so much proximity to power and privilege. Like
Okay.
my body, my being has been socialized to assume entitlement, to have the freedom of movement wherever I go, endless access, right?
Mm.
To believe that I am superior. I know this is going to ruffle feathers, that I don't believe I am superior. I don't believe I am superior either. But this body has been trained to believe that it is better, more right, more
Oh,
innocent.
wow. Right.
And so, right, that's what we know of like the story of white people socialized in the United States of America. And that's not to say white supremacy doesn't exist around the world, but that is what I understand to be, right, the way that we have been trained in white bodies to uphold this particular hierarchy of bodies and system of power. And so while I may know in my mind that this is wrong, I may have read a million anti-racism books and gone to a million anti-racism courses and been an ally and been an organizer and gotten arrested and yada, yada, yada. This body is still a trained body. I'm 50 years
Mm.
old. It has been trained and conditioned into whiteness for 50 years. And so the idea that I can just transcend this body one day and graduate to like some like, race neutral way of being and moving in the world, I think is just really unrealistic. And so
That's
I just say that because I think that level, this work that we're talking about, which I think is like, how do we not replicate the very systems that we're trying to transform with our
right.
bodies, with our interactions, with our relationships, requires that level of inquiry, interrogation, and accountability. And it is
Mm.
ongoing, and it will be my inquiry until I die, most likely. Right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's so deep. I'm thinking about all the all the listeners right now that I want to like really, continue to make this tangible, because that inquiry and that investigation is so critical. It's mission critical. And it's one thing to know it. And this is what I'm reflecting and gathering from what you're saying. It's one thing to know it in our minds. And a lot of us do know it in our minds, but it's another to really like have our bodies move in a way that's congruent with what's happening in our minds.
Yeah.
We have many people that are constantly, being sold this sort of this idea that wellness and having access to wellness, taking this space and time for ourselves is really mission critical to being able to be healthy in this world. How do I show up in this world? Well, I'm going to go and spend a lot of money on all these wellness practices. And then there's this sense, and I think you bring this up a lot in your work, but there's this sense that like, it's one thing to take care of yourself, but then how do we do that? But then how do we also hold the tension that there's so many people that actually will never have access? Like, it's a deep privilege to have access to wellness. It's such a deep privilege to be able to pay and go to a yoga class somewhere. It's such a deep privilege to go on a retreat and spend 7 days out in Costa Rica somewhere. I'm not shaming anybody that may be in those positions, but I'm just saying, like, how do you speak to somebody? How do you call somebody into a investigation or a level of accountability that is experiencing or going on these longer sort of detoxifications through the wellness industrial complex? How do you speak to them in a way that allows them to perhaps still explore their retreats? And, I lead retreats overseas. I take people overseas.
Same.
I mean, I'm just as much of a culprit. I'm just as guilty as anyone. I'm taking people to, I've taken people to Belize. I've taken people overseas to Iceland. I've taken groups of students with me to Bali, for that matter. So like, how do you reconcile that? I want to know.
I mean, I think part of it is I don't reconcile it. I mean, I think this is the thing. This is part of the challenge, is like, we want reconciliation. We want purity. We want clean lines and neat and tidy. And this is not neat and tidy. It is a contradiction. And just to make it more complex, I do all of those things too. Like, I don't believe that the spiritual and indigenous practices and wisdom that Western wellness is built on top of, right, is irrelevant to how we survive this moment. I think it's deeply relevant. And this inquiry, by the way, of like, which I would call like a version of inner work, right? Of like, how have we internalized the myths of dominant culture in our own bodies, right? How are they alive in our somatic movements? Is, you could consider, right? Like, it's like, sure, it's movement building, but it's also like, it comes from that sort of like inner work, internal work lineage. And so I don't think it's that simple, right? I think often what I say to people, even like the privilege thing, I think is like, is very real. But it's not the whole story, because to go to wellness retreats or to practice mindfulness or to eat organic, or to have a net zero home is wholly insufficient in addressing the collective suffering of this moment. It is wholly insufficient. Mindfulness is not going to end racism, like, at all, right? Abundance mindset is not going to solve poverty, systemic poverty. Eating organic is not going to feed hungry people around the world. I mean, like, it's just like the absurdity of it, actually.
Wow.
And that's not to say those things are wrong or bad, right? But I just think that like we need to go deeper. Some of, I think, what wellness perpetuates, Western wellness in sort of like the modern sense perpetuates, is that if I just do my work, if I just clean my body, if I just be mindful and enlightened in my psyche, then my being a good person in the world will have a ripple effect and systemically transform like deep historical entrenched designed systems of harm. And that's just not true. But it's also not true that not doing those things, like I also believe that if more of us actually like were contemplative and did the embodied work, right? And then we'd be more equipped to show up and meet this moment and to actually like hold the complexity of who we are, right, on a collective level and how we meet each other so that we can all survive this moment together. So it's not to say it's irrelevant, but it's insufficient alone. And which is why like there's this incredible, uprising of like politicizing healing, right? And you've had a lot of people on your podcast who are talking about this. You have been talking about this. I have been talking about this, right? How important it is to connect the dots, that what is happening in here is happening out there. What is happening out there is happening in here. And there's no, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams has this brilliant quote that there is no change without inner work, right? And without collective change, no change matters. I'm paraphrasing that, but it's like the inner is the outer is the inner. The personal is political. The individual is collective. And the more we can reframe well-being as that, the more likely we are to actually like bring these practices into really generative ways of being and doing and building.
I mean, and well-being in that way requires systems thinking, right? So
that's right.
What you said about the abundance mindset is not going to solve global poverty. Hallelujah to that. And it's bypassing a critical juncture of what does it mean to be in the world today as someone who understands that liberation, that healing is not separate, right? So that idea in and of itself,
that's right,
requires a deep understanding of that proximity to power that you were naming earlier, and how if I do have access to power, if I am able-bodied, if I am white-bodied, if I happen to have $1 billion in my bank account, that proximity to power also requires a dismantling of power itself. And that's where I think we keep getting caught and held up as a species, right? I think it's really, really hard to convince somebody with power to give it up. I'm still trying to understand when and where that'll really happen, willfully, right? Without needing a revolution, without needing people to stand up in arms, to boycott, to try to throw every kind of wrench they can in the machinery of the machinery of those capitalist imperialist structures. It actually requires the people with the power to say, you know what, I'd rather share the power. Because to me, like having access back to the retreats and back to wellness, back to like the privilege to be like, I'm going to choose not to eat food for the next week and do like, a juice fast or what, I'm going to intentionally make myself hungry. Like the privilege of that, when you have people around the world that are literally dying of starvation, the privilege to say that and to do that for your own personal health, to say, I'm going to take a break from food when there's people out there that don't have that. So like that dissonance is really intriguing to me. I love how you said you don't reconcile it. That was powerful for me to hear, because I think you're right. You don't reconcile it. However, I think there has to be more that we can do to challenge the machinery. And if we don't challenge the machinery, then we are complicit in the machine. And when you started talking to me right at the beginning of the show, we were talking about the collapse. And to me, the collapse is tied intricately to our not challenging the system that we're currently in, and that internal system and that external system, those are deeply related. How do people turn from wellness practitioners, from mindfulness practitioners, from contemplative practitioners, from yoga practitioners, from health food junkies to organic food junkies to farmers? How do they turn from that into activists, or maybe not even activists, but into people that are actually helping to create these new systems that I think we both know need to happen? Like what's the key that turns here?
I mean, there's so much I want to say to all of the brilliant things that you just said. I want to just start with like power, because that's where you started. And I think this is a really important point. And I think it's related to what you're asking, because I think that we have a really distorted relationship with power, all of us, everyone. We are either obsessed with it or we are ambivalent about it. And I think we also often confuse what we know to be social and institutional power, right? Cultural power with personal power, trying to discern between social and institutional power and personal power, just because I think we conflate the two. And when you're talking about privilege, what I understand is that you're talking about our proximity to social and institutional power, power that has been designed and constructed by people with power, basically. That is very different than personal power, which is like the power all of us have, the power that cannot be given or taken away. And I only bring that up because I think we conflate those things sometimes. And we've also simultaneously been told we don't have any power. We've been disempowered by systems, right? And that we should be reaching for the power out there instead of cultivating the power in here. So I just wanted to like say that, because I think sometimes when we talk about privilege, we put privilege on a pedestal in a way that like makes social and institutional power more valuable than personal power. And I just think it's really important for us to be like, oh, no, we all have power. The question, personal power, the question is, what do we do with that power? And how do we reckon with our relationship to social and institutional power and our proximity to it? I think you're right that with those of us who have more proximity to that kind of power, we can walk with wrenches. We can throw wrenches in the system. We can disrupt. We can block, right? We can fuck shit up from the inside out. I think that's a possibility. I don't think that'll get us where we're going, but that I do think that will help reduce harm for people who are often targeted by those systems. But I don't think that's the whole story either, right? I think that how we build outside of social and institutional power through mutual aid and collective care is also like really powerful political action, right? And how we do the personal work, again, like not in isolation or separate from, but as a part of the larger political project of like, how do we excavate these toxic myths so that we can show up more skillful, more honest, more whole for each other and for the work at hand?
Yeah.
And the thing I just want to say, just to answer that last question you said, is I don't have a particular prescription, because I don't think there is one. I don't think there's a handbook, one right way for us to meet this particular moment and reclaim our power. However, I do think the thing that is possible, that makes anything possible, is that we do it collectively. And I think so much of our activism happens individually or separately or in isolation or even just in bursts, like the way that like we get fired up in response to some like immediate crisis and then go back to our life as if that crisis has ended, when in fact that crisis has just gone underground. And so that's some of the questions we're asking in our work right now is, okay, we may not have like traditional political power, right? Like we know that our voting rights are being threatened. We know that we don't have any branch in government right now that is fighting for the big we. We just know that, right? I don't care what party you subscribe to, like that's just real, right? Like,
yeah, neither party.
So what?
It's so true. Neither party. This is both parties, both majority parties are complicit in this. Absolutely.
And no one is coming to save us, right? So the idea that we just need one more Zoran Mamdani or one more epic, progressive leader that's going to change everything is absurd, right? Because it's not about one person. It's about the whole system, the whole culture, the whole thing needs to change. And so the question then becomes, where do we have power right now in this moment to like resist, to push back, to make change, to survive, to get people fed, to protect people from being disappeared on the street? And I think there's a couple places where we really do have power. One is we have the power to divest and boycott. We have the power to withhold our investments, our money, our currency from the system that thrives on that. Right? Like if we can bankrupt the system, I think that is like some hardcore collective leverage. And what I want to say about that I think is really important is I think organizing is really important around sort of like the movement to divest and boycott, because it's not enough that like here and there we don't buy from different stores. Like we have to collectively starve big corporations, big box companies. So like what happened with Target, for example, which was like a coordinated, organized boycott, did considerable damage to that institution, right? Like actually shook that institute. Did it close it down? No. Did it transform it wholesale? Probably not. But did it fuck shit up? Yeah, it did. Right. So like we can, and I say that because like you and I are having this conversation right now in the third week of November. And next week there is an enormous blackout that is being called during like a so-called holiday week.
Right.
Where people tend to spend tons of money. And this is also where big corporations, the big five, make a ton of their money, right? This is when they like actually bring in a ton of revenue. Like if we can cut them off, right? I think that's power. That is power that we have collectively to like block and disrupt business as usual. So that's one thing. And the second thing I'll just say is the reality, I think, of this moment, and I think a lot more people are waking up to this, is that the government is not going to take care of us. It's not going to give us health care. It's not going to protect us. It's not going to keep us safe, right? We know this because we see what's happening with law enforcement more and more every year, right? It's not going to raise the minimum wage, which is still $7, same minimum wage since the 1970s, which was 50 years ago, by the way.
Crazy.
Like I always have to be like...
That is nuts that the minimum wage
so like,
is, yeah.
So there's no...
Nuts.
Right? So like the government, the system is not... It's not designed to take care of us. So the question then becomes, how do we take care of us?
Yeah.
How do we take care of us? How do we make sure in the absence of SNAP's benefits that our neighbors get fed? Right? How do we make sure that in the like barrage of like ICE agents and border control and deputized military and law enforcement, we make sure we keep our neighbors safe? Like, how do we do that? And so much of what we're seeing sort of like emerge right from the ground, right from the grassroots to help patrol neighborhoods, protect our neighbors, protect our migrant communities, but also like rally to make sure folks have food in the absence of SNAPs, not just in the absence of SNAPs, but also like in the like inflation of like what it costs to even buy a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
So I just think like that is to me where if we can collectively, right, care for each other and ask like what's needed, what's missing, what can we not count on anymore? How do we take care of us? I think that is very powerful activism, right? So if you're like a wellness person who cares about people being well, like that is a very easy, collective care is like a very like organic transition for you.
Right.
Right? Everyone deserves to be well. How can you make sure that your neighbors also are well, that they're getting what they need to be well?
Love that. I love that. And that's a great place for anyone to start, right? That's a great place to start. Just like looking after the neighbors. And it's beautiful because it does come back to just it's common sense, but like in the absence of those social safety nets, it's where we are, it's where we've landed. And it's what's needed in this moment right now. It's for us to all figure out a way to be that for each other. I'm thinking a lot about how oftentimes in this buying season, and it's always buying season. So, you know, if you're tuned in and it's March or June,
that's right,
and you're listening to this episode 6 months after we've recorded it, it's fine because it's still buying season. We're always buying. People are always consuming. I was thinking the other day, I was like, it was just Amazon Prime Day like 3 weeks ago, and everything was like on sale. And now just in a week from now, it's going to be another Black Friday. And then there's a Labor Day sale. And then again, we're always being somehow in some way being made to feel like there is scarcity and you have to get this new thing. And if you don't get this new thing, you're missing out. And I think what's really palpable for me in this moment is I'm thinking about those minimum wages that you're talking about. And I'm thinking about how there is such an opportunity right now for all of us to just support small little mom and pop stores and businesses, like the people in your community that are making artwork, that are selling paintings in their small little stores that are, in your town. You could go and buy gift cards that are, handmade gift cards that are not Hallmark gift cards, for example. You could buy clothes from local textile makers, from artists online. You could go to Etsy and find people that are like out there making and spinning beautiful fabric and beautiful scarves. And you can, instead of buying from, these corporations that are needing to, continue to like just mass produce everything, we can kind of come back to like really cherishing once again that lost art of fine artisan boutique textile work. Like you can go buy a jar of canned preserves or, from a local farm. And you could gift that to your people, because in the absence of respectable minimum wage, in the absence of people getting paid salaries of what they're worth, in the absence of universal health care,
that's right.
In the absence of all
paid family leave,
of paid family leave, this is how we can give back. And it's actually a really simple thing to do this year. Any time during the year, you could make a conscious choice to go down the street and find something that is made by a person and, not a machine that's connected to a big corporation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I've seen a lot of that, sort of like people are definitely shifting their attention to buy locally, right? And I also just want to invite people to like be really curious and critical about like everything you buy. Like look it up. Who owns this product that I am buying? Are they funding wars, right? Are they funding are they putting pesticides in there, right? Are they endorsing fascist candidates? Like do your homework, y'all, because a lot of fancy wellness brands, right, that we think are like organic and clean and pure and detoxifying are in fact very much invested in upholding the very system that is making us sick. So I think I want to invite people to like do your homework. And there's like actually like amazing apps out there that you can download that will kind of do all of that filtering for you. Like if you wanted to like scan a brand at the store to see like, is this brand, conducting themselves ethically? And of course, like there's no purity, right? But I think like there are tools, y'all. There are resources where we can make more discerning and more ethical and more conscious decisions together. And the other thing I would just say is that like, to take it to like another level, like get a WhatsApp group together with all of your friends and all of your people and collectively commit to not buy from Amazon, collectively commit to not buy from Home Depot, collectively commit, right, to like not, to like doing all of your holiday shopping or whatever that is for you from Etsy or from your local cute little artistic, craft
or an
store.
Antique store.
Or like buying used,
used things.
Consignment products, right, which are like so cute and so like, so I do think like, and I say that also because I think that like peer support really matters. Like being witnessed doing the right thing really matters for us. We know that culturally, but like we build culture. Like when we make shopping at consignment shops cool again, because we're not, buying mass produced products that are extractive, but also exploitive. We're making a new way, right, of like being and doing and spending and relating.
Let's move deeper into the the discernment, right? The discernment of like understanding that wellness. So everything is being sold to us and marketed to us. And so instead of buying from the small mom and pop spots, we're buying from the places that are hyper cheap and hyper, inexpensive because they can mass produce them. Perhaps this requires spending a little bit more money on your gift or whatever you're buying for yourself, because it's taking a lot more time to make because it's hand stitched, it's hand sewn, it's hand
Yeah.
painted. But then let's move that to well-being, right? So there are well-being practices that are constantly being marketed to people, always trying to capitalize even on our own fears. How do you like discern? How would you help somebody discern between practices that are like true practices of well-being, compared to those marketed, toxifying versions of well-being?
I mean, I feel like the first thing I want to say is that, like, I think everyone, like, discernment is different for different people, and different people need different things at different times. And so I don't
Mhm.
have like it's this or it's that. But I do think that, like, I think doing some of that, like, back work of, like, is this a corporation, or a producer that is conspiring for, like, our, like, whole health? And what I mean by whole is, like, all of us, everybody, right? Gets to be well, is maybe a question I would ask people to, like, ask and also, like, investigate. Um, I tend to trust wellness brands that at the very least acknowledge the political conditions
Mm.
we exist in.
Okay.
I like that just makes me, in terms of just like trust building, like when a wellness brand can be like, we acknowledge this is happening and that this wellness product isn't the answer to all of your problems. Like, that makes me want to buy that product actually a little bit more. And so, and I think, like, raising our expectations of wellness products and wellness brands to have a more political analysis, and to also be like, to take responsibility and be accountable to how they're situated in these broader systems that are making us sick and causing harm, really matters. And I'll just give you one example. In a lot of ways, most of us are dysregulated and fucking wild and out right now because, like, we're living through a fascist regime in the
Right.
US. And
Right.
so, of course, our anxiety is up. Of course, many of us are depressed. Of course, we might feel less secure or less safe. I just want to, like, yeah, like that's what happens, right? When the conditions are such. And the idea that wellness is going to sell you something that can inoculate you from the political and social conditions of this moment, it's
Mhm.
just bullshit.
Right.
It's just bullshit. It's just a bypass.
Yeah.
And I guess what I mean by that also is, like, we need to normalize that, like, these are really hard times right now and it's hard to be alive in this moment.
Mm. Mm.
And no amount of wellness is going to allow us to escape that. Like, we can't escape
Right.
this. And I know that's a
Right.
hard truth, but it's just, but it's the truth. It is
Yeah.
the truth. And so what does that mean for how we move through this moment with as much care and grace and compassion and curiosity and regulation as possible? And to me, like, that question might point us to wellness and well-being practices that will move us in the right direction and not just take us offline. Things like collective care, things like, I just saw something today by Priya Parker that said, finding excuses for gathering will save us. And I was like, now that is a wellness practice right there.
Mm. Mm, I love
Finding
that.
reasons to come together will
Yeah.
save us.
Yeah. That's deep. That's deep.
Right. And that's not a thing that you're sold. That's not a product that you're being, it's not some collagen, supplement. It just is like how we get through this moment.
Yeah.
And so I just think we get to be the inventors of what wellness can be, of what wellness looks like, of what is possible for us, so that more of us can be well, and so that all of us can move through this moment and survive.
No, I love that. Thank you, Kerri. I mean, that's the medicine I think we all need right now. And I want to be clear too. I think we both, we can draw off each other's energy, but I also want to be really clear in terms of, like, what I said earlier. I am all for people taking care of themselves, right?
Totally.
Like, I am not saying at any point, and am I saying that I don't want you to go to your yoga class? I don't want you to sit on your meditation cushion and meditate. I lead silent meditation retreats, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out here teaching all the time wellness practices to people. I think those are really important. It's really important that you're eating the right foods, that you're tuning your body and tuning your mind. And what I'm saying is, what we're missing sometimes, and some ways that we can gloss over the other part of what's equally essential, which is what you spoke about earlier, Kerri, which is like the inner and the outer, the internal ecosystem and the external ecosystem.
That's right.
Are equally connected. So for me, tending to the internal ecosystem is mission critical. We all need to deprogram our implicit bias. We all need to
That's right.
deprogram ourselves from the conditioning to believe that we need to keep buying and buying and buying things in order to find happiness. We need to detoxify from those things, as you write about in your incredible book. We need to detoxify from those values and those. And as we do that work, we need to, and this is where I think we sometimes in the wellness industrial complex industry, we miss the mark. We need to put equal weight to the external ecosystem building. We need to put external pressure on the people, the politicians, and the systems that are present to make sure that people don't go hungry, to make sure SNAP benefits aren't cut, to make sure that people do have universal health care, to make sure, folks can retire and live and work 30 hours a week and have enough to feed their kids and pay rent and also to go on their own vacations. Like, if we don't wish that for other people to experience, and all I'm thinking about is my ayahuasca retreat in Brazil, and that's all I'm thinking about, and I'm not putting equal weight to, okay, I'm going to get home and how am I going to contribute back to the community with this new knowledge I've gained, then I think you're missing the mark. And I will say that I do think you're missing the mark. And then you become too overly engrossed in perhaps one's own like selfish well-being, and missing the collective care that has to happen. So I just wanted to clarify that point for listeners, because I'm not trying to shame anyone personally. I don't think that's healthy, right?
No, I think the way that we model, that there is no purity, right? Like, self-care is self-accountability. And it is really important that people like take responsibility for what's happening here. Tend to this, please, y'all. Like, this is essential, right? It's just not the whole story. So thank you for that, like, clarification. And you and I are in this. And, the thing I'll also say about this is, like, there's no purity. So, like, even like, I have to find the perfect yoga class that's politicized, or I have to find the perfect wellness retreat center no, sorry, y'all. I hate to break it to you, but like, there's no perfection in this. There's no purity. And so, like, we also will have to grapple with the messiness and the complexity of how we practice wellness inside of this very toxic system, even while we move in the direction, right, of like collective care and collective well-being. And I'll just say one last thing to add to what you said, which is, and I genuinely believe this, like, as like a core theory, as a core belief, that it's not just that it's not right that we engage in only like individualized wellness. I believe it's that you actually can't be well. You actually, I don't care how perfect your yoga practice is. I don't care how pure and macrobiotic your food. I don't care if you live on the top of a mountain and a net zero. Like, you actually, like, none of us actually can be well, despite the yearning for wellness, when so many people are suffering. We are an interdependent being. And so, like, as long as other people are suffering in ways that are like completely unnecessary and egregious, so are we. So are we. And so I just want to say it like that. Like, if you actually really want to be well, if you're like, if you really like, it's like, yes, you deserve to be well too. But if you really want to be well, we have to be engaged in the well-being of everyone, or not at all.
Aho. That's right. Right on point. So, Kerri, I'm going to ask you something, and we might have already done it because you and I have been bouncing off each other now for an hour, but I want to ask you something to see if there's anything left in the lemon to juice here. I want you to say the thing. Okay. So what I want you to do right now, if there's anything left here, say the thing right now that would make it hard for someone to look you in the eye.
Oh,
Meaning like you're at that conference, you're
listen,
on
I
that
just,
panel, and I want you to disrupt harm right now instead of protecting people's comfort in this moment. Is there anything that you could say right now that would make it really hard for someone if they saw you on the street to look you in the eye?
this is a really good question for everyone else but people like us, because all I do is say those things. So,
Yeah,
is what I want to say. I'll say the one thing related to what you're asking. So I'm going to go I'm going to be like disobedient as
yeah.
I do.
Please, please be
Um,
as disobedient as you can be.
when I think about like what is the work of the work of the work of the work, especially at like an inner level for all of us, it's not like how can we get this right, or how can we be more moral, or how can we get more ethical, or how can we make better decisions, or how can we be a better. I actually don't think that's what it is. I actually think it's, can we build a capacity to hold the messiness and the discomfort and the complexity and the contradiction of this moment? Because as you and I feel like you and I have been like stirring a pot this whole time, and there's not been like some reconciled or clear recommendation or handbook for like, here's how you do this. And I often tell people, like, one of my favorite like pieces of wisdom is that if you're in a generative conversation, often you leave that conversation with less answers than when you came into that conversation, but you leave with better questions
Right.
and maybe a deeper and wider capacity to hold the complex, the discomfort that comes with not having a right, pure, exact, certain solution, but having a capacity to hold more
Yeah.
complexity, more questions, more yearning, like more like we can do better. We deserve better for ourselves and for each other, right? Higher expectations, right? For like what it is to be
Hmm.
well for all people. And so I just wanted to say that piece. It's like, that is the thing I just keep coming back to in my work, in group work, in one-on-one work, in embodied and somatic work, in activist work, is like, we need to build our capacity for conflict, for discomfort, for uncertainty, for chaos, because that is the reality of what we are navigating right now. And if we can do that, and that's where I do think like these inner practices can really play a role in helping
Yeah.
prepare us, ready us, right, for the uncertain future that we are moving towards. And so like that piece feels really alive for me right now. That's sort of like the thing. I don't like, I say all the things all the time, but that
Hmm.
is the thing I feel most challenged in practicing.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Kerri, for calling that in. It's so on point for this moment as we manage the chaos. Like we have to develop that capacity. Prentice spoke about that a little bit. Prentice
Yes.
Hemphill was just on a couple of episodes ago, and she was speaking about how that's really what we need to be doing right now. We need to be teaching that and learning how to manage chaos and messiness and not get scared
That's
by
right.
messiness. I think it's so
That's right.
important. Kerri, it has been an absolute joy for me to be in conversation with you.
Same.
I tell my friends that I selfishly started the podcast so I could talk to some of the most incredibly brilliant and passionate and wise people I could find, and you're one of those people. I want to ask you as we close, is like what's next for you? You're doing a lot of movement building work. Is there anything you could tell us about your work and where we can find you, and like what you're going to be up to over the coming year?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I feel like a lot of what I'm playing with right now, I say playing because it's like all experimentation and play, is a lot of what we talked about. Like we're doing a lot of local mutual aid work and really trying to build capacity for how we show up to love, like to defend and care for one another. So that's a thing I'm really invested in right now, is like, how do we do that? How do we build? But like on the practice side of things, I'm really obsessed with this idea of movement for the movement and the ways that we can intervene at the level of body with all of the sort of like dominant conditioning and internalized myths and capacity building for chaos and uncertainty and messiness that we're talking about is really using like embodied movement, somatic movement as like an intervention. Dance movement is like also like a big passion of mine, as a way to better understand how we move through the world and how we're shaped, right? And how we can intervene and discover new ways of embodying new moves, new patterns, new ways of relating and creating and imagining and building together. So that's a big passion point. And we're going to be building out a lot of that stuff in 2026. So look out for that.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. And everybody, please, we got links on all the show notes. We're going to have links to Kerri Kelly's book called American Detox, which is an awesome way for you to dive deeper into the topics we've been talking about today. I know you can find Kerri Kelly as well online, leading all types of programs around the country. We'll have all those links in the show notes as well for you to learn more about Kerri. And I think for this episode as well, I'm going to find some shops. I'm going to find some people.
Awesome.
That maybe we can point people to buy things that are local, or maybe not local, but just handmade and more like handcrafted, just like ways for you to get gifts and think about supporting local businesses. And Kerri, if you got any leads for that, send them my way and we'll put them into the show notes.
You got it.
Yeah, I love it. And just so deeply appreciate you, Kerri.
So appreciate
my sister.
you.
You out here doing the work. And I know we're in here for the long haul. So thank you so much for your time.
I'm in it with you, my friend. Thank you for being in this fiery conversation with me.
Yay. Until next time. Peace.
Peace.
Yes.